President Trump is threatening to use the Insurrection Act as he orders red state troops into blue states. A look tonight at how states are responding and the nonstop effort here in Colorado to recruit more agents to carry out the president's agenda. Loveland's mayor opens up City Hall to the homeless after the city closed a shelter, drawing cheers from her supporters and condemnation from critics.
I was concerned about, public safety, people's health.
Hundreds of students are left hanging as the federal government again pulls funding because it doesn't align with the president's views.
We just know that at the moment we can't rely on federal funding, and we will figure out alternative ways to keep going.
And as Denver's ethics board slams DIA for appalling spending, we'll talk about something some of you have long found appalling: what I call the airport. That's tonight on Next. President Trump is threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy troops on American soil as judges move to block his effort to send the National Guard from red states into blue states against their will. Democratic leaders across the country are warning that America's headed for martial law. Trump has targeted Denver and Colorado with words, but has not moved to send red state troops here at this point. Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser called Trump's actions unconstitutional and urged people to use their voices to protect democracy. Trump is falsely claiming that Portland, Oregon is war-ravaged. One of his own appointees on the federal bench just blocked his plan to call in out-of-state troops to crack down on protests outside an ICE facility in Portland. And today, leaders in Illinois sued to stop Trump from sending troops from Illinois and Texas into Chicago. Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker says Trump is trying to provoke a violent confrontation that would allow him to use the Insurrection Act to bring the military against American citizens. Colorado's Democratic majority at the state capitol passed a law this year trying to keep out-of-state National Guard troops from being sent here against Colorado's will. But the law does allow it if they're acting under federal orders, which has been the situation when Trump has sent or tried to send troops into Washington, D.C., Portland, and Chicago. Trump's stated reason for sending red state troops into blue states is to protect immigration agents who are facing increasing resistance to Trump's mass deportation campaign. The federal government wants to greatly increase the size of its deportation force and is running television ads frequently on this station and others trying to recruit local law enforcement to do deportation duty for the feds. Our Marshall Zellinger takes a closer look.
Attention Denver law enforcement.
The federal government is actively recruiting officers who already have jobs. This commercial is for immigration and customs enforcement officers.
In sanctuary cities, you're ordered to stand down.
Let's talk about this real quick. Denver city policy and state law limits law enforcement cooperation with ICE, with limited exceptions like if a judge has signed a court order. Simply put, Denver police are not allowed to do ICE's job for ICE. As stated at the end of this ad, ICE is offering a bonus of up to $50,000. So how does that, plus the salary, compare to current law enforcement pay in Colorado? First, the bonus appears to be paid out over 3 years, not $50,000 up front. The salary listed for an ICE officer is between about $50,000 and $90,000 per year. When asked about the recruiting push by ICE, Denver Police Chief Ron Thomas told Axios Denver last month, quote, "I think that's a terrible job for terrible pay." A DPD recruit is guaranteed $71,000. 2 years later, they would make $82,000. In Aurora, a recruit makes about $68,000, and 2 years after that, they would make $83,000. Both Aurora and Denver pay more than $110,000 4 years after graduating the academy. So is the ICE bonus enticing officers to ditch local departments? We checked with Denver, Aurora, Boulder, Arapahoe County, and Douglas County. Only Boulder police tell us that one officer, during an exit interview, said they were leaving the police department for ICE.
What about the quality of a recruit? Is ICE going to hire officers who can't seem to be hired locally in Colorado because of past problems? Here's what I can tell you based on publicly available information on ICE's recruiting site. If you have discrepancies in your background investigation, you have an opportunity to address the discrepancy. It doesn't say you're automatically out. If you knowingly provide false information, it could result in you being found unsuitable or unfit for the position. Could, not will. And officers are required to take a lie detector test. In one place, Kyle, it says if you failed an ICE-administered exam in the last two years, you can't be hired. Then there's another part that says if you fail, you can talk about it with the examiner.
And we know that folks who sign up for deportation duty are going to be in pressure cooker situations, right? They could potentially be in dangerous situations. They could also be facing public protest, which for the moment, it remains legal to protest in America. So you could have people shouting at you and saying different things. And all of this is often captured on camera. And we have seen a number of times recently where agents have made some pretty baffling choices in the way that they've put their hands on people or used physical force. This is what people are signing up to do.
We see it from cameras, by the way, from the public. We don't see it from ICE officer body-worn cameras. We see it from the external view, because I don't think it's a requirement for ICE officers to have the same responsibility as a local law enforcement officer that has to wear the body camera.
Marshall Zellinger, thank you very much. Day 6 of the government shutdown. No end in sight. Without a funding deal, Colorado's federal courts are preparing for major disruptions as soon as next week. We have already seen some cases put on hold, including the Trump administration's legal battle to overturn Colorado's restrictions on local government cooperation with ICE. Late last week, a federal judge paused the Justice Department lawsuit against state and city leaders in Colorado and Denver. The Trump administration is trying to overturn state laws and local policies that restrict local law enforcement cooperation with ICE. But the Justice Department says due to the government shutdown, they are only allowing their team to work on emergency cases, so they will pick that lawsuit back up when the shutdown ends. Cases that don't directly involve the federal government have not seen the same delays at this point. According to our partners at Colorado Politics, the administrative office for the federal court system says it's business as usual for most of the federal courts until at least October 17th. After that date, staff will be expected to work without pay, and some cases will be delayed or moved to virtual hearings. When the city of Loveland closed its only overnight shelter for adults living on the street last week, some people set up their tents right outside City Hall. Over the weekend, the mayor allowed those people to stay inside City Hall, and she stayed with them. Her critics on city council say they are appalled. They consider it trespassing.
We had a huge drop in temperature, which, we suffered through Saturday night. But when you add wet, you can have hypothermia at 45 degrees if you're wet. And so I was concerned about, public safety, people's health.
That's Loveland Mayor Jackie Marsh, who told us she tried to make a quick decision when the temperatures dropped and the rain came down last night. She said the city's Day Resource Center was not staffed at the time, wasn't prepared to open on short notice.
Send the city attorney and city manager an email or text and tell them this is what's happening, and they did their best to rectify it, tried to get the resource center open in time, and they would have been ready later in the evening, but by then it was downpour and everyone would have had to walk at least 15 minutes in the pouring rain.
So that was last night. Marsh says the people who were brought inside left early this morning, and the city is now preparing that Day Resource Center as a shelter for the next time the weather turns. We talked with City Councilman Steve Olson, who went down to City Hall when he heard what was going on last night. He sent us this video from inside. Last week, he was one of the 4 on council who voted against extending Loveland's temporary overnight shelter. He wants the city to focus on more sustainable alternatives. But he told us he believes the mayor overstepped her authority by allowing people to stay in City Hall after hours.
Well, I actually got a text from one of the other councilors to say, didn't you know that the City Hall has been occupied? The mayor invited him in. She does not have that authority, and she did not have the permission of the city manager to do that.
Currently, police are clearing the encampment at City Hall tonight, directing people to go over to that resource center, which is being open for the night. City Council in Loveland is going to meet tomorrow night to talk about both short-term and long-term solutions. The federal government is pulling back on promised funding in a number of places with the reasoning that it doesn't align with President Trump's views. Our Angeline McCall looks at one such case where hundreds of students are being impacted.
Changes to funding mean an uncertain future for programs for culturally diverse or multilingual learners who are part of CU Boulder's Bueno Center for Multicultural Education.
We did not expect this to happen.
Dr. Tanya Hogan is the executive director. Last month, she received a notice they would not receive federal funds, already promised to them over the course of 5 years.
And then in the letter, it said that it was discontinued because one of the activities, a workshop that we were doing, didn't align with the current administration priorities.
The lost funding totals over $3 million. impacting 2 programs over the next several years, including the College Assistance Migrant Program for students coming from migrant farm worker backgrounds, along with another program for educators in rural communities.
We're just going to see a stop in pathways and access to education because we do not have the funding to be able to continue.
CU Boulder stepped in with bridge funding until June. After that, the center is still looking for other solutions.
We've never had this happen like this before. I mean, we were already awarded the money. I think that's the frustrating and disappointing part. We are doing everything we can.
The grants covered a 5-year span. In that time, the funding would have touched around 700 students, in many cases fully paying for their tuition or other expenses. Kyle?
And Angeline, we've seen with some of these funding cuts that they seem directly targeted at blue states or at cities. This one, though, is kind of across the country.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at, for instance, the camp program. That is a national program. Even MSU Denver has a camp program as well. And so while we know that there are 700 or hundreds of students or educators that are impacted because of these funding cuts, at CU Boulder specifically, we can imagine, the nationwide impact.
Angeline McCall, thank you very much. When you heard about Loveland's struggles with homelessness lately, you didn't just watch. Your latest Word of Thanks microgiving campaign raised about $40,000 for House of Neighborly Service, or HNS, which works in that community to keep families and individuals who are on the verge of homelessness from losing their housing and ending up on the streets. They help to stabilize lives in crisis, and they're going to be able to reach more people thanks to your generosity. Your weekly Word of Thanks microgiving campaigns have raised more than $16 million for nonprofits across our state. 5 years into this, you know the deal. Long as you're still there and I'm still here, we will stay at this week after week. So please keep sending me ideas of nonprofits that make an impact in your part of Colorado. Email next@9news.com or text next 303-871-1491. You would think the head of an airport could find a screaming deal on a flight, but no. A high-dollar flight for a bunch of airport executives has landed the airport's top man in front of the Denver Ethics Commission.
I am very worried. I don't know how it will go.
Advocates and therapists are watching closely as Colorado's ban on conversion therapy ends up before the Supreme Court. That's next. Denver's Ethics Board says it's appalled that the airport sent 9 executives to a conference in Spain flying business class at a cost of $9,000 to $19,000 per person. And the Ethics Board says airport CEO Phil Washington had a seemingly cavalier attitude about their investigation. But in the end, the Ethics Board determined Washington did not violate city ethics rules. This started with the airport leader's junket to Spain earlier this year, and credit to Brian Moss over at CBS for breaking this story. The spending did not come out of tax dollars. It was from airport fees that travelers pay. The Ethics Board says Washington originally said he didn't know how much the flights cost. Not true. And that he said that they flew business class because they had a quick turnaround for speaking engagements right away. Not true. The Denver Ethics Board says it could not prove that Washington used city resources for his personal gain. But the Ethics Board said that Washington's conduct, quote, falls short of the board's basic expectations and erodes the confidence of the citizens of the city of Denver. Airport sent us a statement saying that they have made updates to their travel policy. We're getting some feedback from a Next viewer upset that I called Denver International Airport DIA instead of the airport's preferred term, DEN. E writes in to say, really must clue you in, it is not DIA. E writes, DEN has spent a ton of money and gone to a lot of effort of rebranding. So if you've watched this program, you know that we love debates about what people call places, right? How place names are pronounced, who has the right to rename this place or that, and also what the people choose to call a place, no matter what government officials or naming rights sponsors say. And we've had this discussion about the airport all 9 years that this program's been on the air. It's DIA to me, just like the Broncos Stadium is mile high. But there's a wide gulf, I think, between corporate naming rights and speech directives that come from government. A Gulf of America, you might even say. We've had fun with the airport leaders over this name over the past few years. Even if they would prefer that we use their branding, their name, they have never threatened to say, limit our reporting access, the way that President Trump did to the Associated Press over the name of the Gulf. My goal here is just to use words that are easily understood. And folks in Colorado know the airport as DIA. I respect the effort that airport leaders have put into their rebranding campaign. And I really respect that they don't use the power of government to punish journalists who use a more widely understood term instead.
Woo, Monday had the look and feel of a Monday. Gray, chilly, rain down here, snow in the mountains, and our high at 50 degrees. That is 20 degrees cooler than average. Showers are starting to move out, not entirely calm and quiet, secretly hoping these clouds move out because the big, beautiful, full supermoon is out tonight, and I'm hoping to see that. Current temperatures 48 at DIA and Lyman, 50 in Fort Collins. We're some 10 to 20 degrees colder than this time yesterday. We've got a bit of moisture coming in on the backside of a system that is moving away from Colorado, tracking a few light mountain snow showers, snow level above 10,000 feet. Showers are tracking from the southwest to the northeast over Denver, out toward Aurora and Bennett. Won't be the super soaker like many of us saw last night. Showers are done a little bit later on tonight, and then we may be looking at a little bit of patchy fog, and that'll be fun through tomorrow morning. Temperatures don't move a whole lot, but grab a jacket and umbrella if you're out in the next 2 hours. How about sunshine in the afternoon and 63. Upper 70s Wednesday, 80s on Thursday. This warm weather trend of upper 70s and 80s will last the second half of the week and right into next weekend.
Is a therapist trying to convince somebody they're not really gay free speech or illegal abuse? Supreme Court's about to take up the case from Colorado. And I am required to notify you that as a middle-aged man in America with an inflated sense of self-importance, I have a podcast. It's just this program, but in podcast form, if that's more convenient for you. Also, you can stream this program each weeknight at 6 p.m. on 9 News Plus. The United States Supreme Court is set to consider tomorrow whether Colorado's law banning conversion therapy violates free speech rights. Colorado and more than 20 other states restrict therapists from trying to change the sexual orientation or gender identity of someone under the age of 18. Kaylee Childs, Christian therapist from Colorado Springs, sued, saying the law violates her First Amendment rights. Medical experts are on the record saying that conversion therapy is ineffective and can be harmful. It can lead to anxiety, depression, suicide.
We agreed to a code of ethics. And in that code of ethics, it states clearly for all helping professionals, do no harm. 3 easy words that when you go into a helping profession, typically you want to avoid that. And this does harm.
The therapist in the case before the court is represented by Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF. They're a conservative Christian legal group that has racked up a string of wins at the Supreme Court on issues from abortion restrictions to religious rights. We are back with your feedback, and I'm guessing it's icy.
Very icy.
Very
slippery.
icy. Very icy, Marilyn says. Well, I will tread carefully next. Feedback from Sandy. Thank you for shining a light on those ICE ads. Judy says, thanks for the coverage of the ICE efforts to bring local law enforcement into their ranks. And this from Richard said, your opinion piece on the name of DIA was awesome. However, Richard writes, also chilling that on your mind was the need to be grateful that reporters are not punished for language. He says, yikes, did you ever think that we would be in a position where this might be a remote possibility? Yes, Richard, I did. Because when people say they want to do something, there's a good chance they're going to do it.